riding with him or anything like that?
Who's that?
Prince.
I think bike riding may have been the only thing we.
9-second delay, Nerd Squad. It
riding.
is 9:35 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, January 28, 2025, Tuesday. This live stream should roll until tomorrow morning. The FBI has instructed me to run it for as close to 12 hours as I can. So it should continue on into tomorrow, and a new one should be initiated around 9 a.m.
the whole time,
unless my instructions change.
Magnificent.
I am not an employee of the FBI, but I've been authorized to state I am an informant since the last week of June. In fact, they've instructed me to state it to just about everyone that's going to prison, from the North Everett Precinct of stalkers to every individual in Unit 207, to the child abusers and kidnappers and stalkers of the dwindling Department of Children, Youth, and Families.
He was like the master,
etc.
You know what I mean? Like he was
now, there is a speech that I need to go over, and there is an update from today, but it's all the same as was addressed in the preceding live stream from today, which was recorded and initiated at 9-something in the morning. So I'm going to
But when I met him, he was
pause this podcast. It's Theo Vaughn's podcast. He had Pat Williams on today's episode. And I'm going to play that recording from this morning, and it will inform you of everything that you need to know. Hasn't really been any other change other than that Unit 207 continues to be planning on proceeding with the remaining felonies. Here we go. Again, remember,
okay, Nerd
it's
Squad.
9:37 p.m.
The case when Unit 207 adds additional obstruction and tampering charges to their looming indictments. There was no delay on the timer at the initiation of this, but there was about a 30-second delay to the live stream actually initiating. It is currently 9:43 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, January 28th.
Remember, it's 9:38 p.m. Same day.
2025. As far as updates go, according to Unit 207's women yesterday, from noonish to roughly 9:45 p.m. PST, there are new fraudulent court orders or an individual order as of yesterday around noonish. The females in Unit 207 were laughing and boasting, feeling they're set to perpetrate with impunity. Then this morning at 8-something in the morning, the North Everett Police Department once again rejected 2 legitimate police reports about their officers and their criminal conduct. The police report from Friday and the police report from Monday. It's Tuesday. The title of this video is the date and the time, and it says Judicial Notice, Crimes by North Everett Precinct / Unit 207 / et al. FBI Informant under threat. The details of this video are going to read similar to the preceding live stream, which read new fraudulent court orders as of noonish 1:27:25. Title says it all. Females in Unit 207 laughing, boasting, feeling they're set to perpetrate with impunity from noonish to 9:45 p.m. PST today, 1:27:25, and then in parentheses, prior video. Now, for those of you that missed it, yesterday, Unit 207 did add additional obstruction and tampering charges to their looming, soon-to-be unsealed indictments, and they cut off a live stream. Fortunately, a portion of that live stream is still on YouTube, and it goes over everything that I need to address other than what I just addressed. So I'm going to press play on that, and then I'm going to add to the description of this video, the description in the preceding video, but I'm going to adjust it for today's date, like it will say yesterday instead of today. Here we go. Pay close attention. Oh, and I don't know if I said this. This is going to be time-stamped and dated, but it's a recording from yesterday. So be advised, the current time is 9:46 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Tuesday, January 28, 2025. This is a
And remember, it's 9:40 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Still Tuesday.
Central recording of Mystic Gwen pursuant to the instructions of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'm not an employee of the FBI, but I've been authorized to state I am an informant since the last week of June. This recording will say it's yesterday's date and time. Just disregard that and listen to the rest of the information. 9-second delay, Nerd Squad. It just turned to 11:04 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Monday, January 27th, 2025. This is a consensual recording of Mystic Gwen pursuant to the instructions of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Be advised, I'm not an employee of the FBI, but I've been authorized to state I am an informant since the last week of June 2024. Now, I do have an update involving the weekend's activity and really just like as of the last hour. Unit 207 has every intention of proceeding ahead with their remaining felonies that they have yet to make actionable. They were advised and instructed to proceed and just basically pretend like they're not going to be going to jail. So I am going to read the police report that was filed today at 7:25 a.m. It was also posted on Facebook and everybody was tagged. Everybody pausing it just to clarify, that was the police report from yesterday at 7-something in the morning on January 27th. Back to the recording. Except for Erica Owens, who blocked me either after she was tagged and or for some reason I was able to find her to tag her, but was unable to keep that tag visible, like within 2 minutes time from a different account. I may sound a little distracted right now. It's because I was looking for a selfie, any selfie from the last month to upload a thumbnail of. I'm just going to use this one. Saving at 11:05 a.m. That police report is available on facebook.com/Mystic Gwen Loves Only You. It's also available in the preceding live stream. Full transcription of this police report in the script I'm going to read, including without the redactions. I am going to redact all of the updates from the YouTube live script, aside from the police report from today and the police report from Friday, neither of which the North Everett Precinct has yet to utilize to obstruct justice. Correction, they rejected both reports at 8-something a.m. PST. Also, there is a tour of my house, as the FBI has instructed me to do every 24 hours at the end of the preceding live stream. Back to this recording. Tamper with, etc. But according to the FBI, their only options are to reject the legitimate reports once again and add additional counts of obstruction and tampering, to have a sham investigation, or to do what they should have done for over 16 months, and fire some fucking officers. So here's that police report. Timestamp 7:10 a.m. PST, January 27th, 2025. Update. Despite the overwhelming evidence in the ongoing federal investigation, the criminal enterprise operating out of Unit 207 persists in its delusional and unlawful conduct. This weekend has been marked by further confirmation of their intent to proceed with their threatened felonies against me: illegal entry, kidnapping, and unlawful detention or committal. On Friday evening, these individuals, including both male and female officers, were overheard openly discussing directives from the various Snohomish County prosecutors facing federal disbarment, directives to proceed with their crimes and to ignore the threat of arrest. Then on Sunday, between 1 p.m. and 2:15 p.m., and again between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m., further discussions were held, including with exterior visitors, solidifying their plans. These are not idle threats, they are clear and present danger. Let me reiterate, for any who are still laboring under the delusion that they can act with impunity, the new fee structure, as outlined in my police report filed on January 24th, 2025, this past Friday, is in effect. Any attempt to break and enter my residence, to kidnap me, or to unlawfully detain me will result in a $10 million penalty, increased to $25 million if my sleep is disturbed, This applies weekdays, weekends, and any time in between. Furthermore, any and all attempts to enforce fraudulent court orders bearing my name, Lynette Renatson, or Mystic Gwen, from 2024 or 2025 are part of this ongoing criminal conspiracy and will be met with the same financial penalties in addition to criminal charges. To the officers of the North Everett Precinct, to Erica Owens, and to any other individual contemplating participation in this criminal conspiracy. You are individually liable for your actions. There is no immunity, past, present, or future, for your conspiracy, your obstruction of justice, your stalking, your harassment, your participation in the kidnapping of my sons, or any other crime you have committed or intend to commit. Your willingness to follow unlawful directives does not absolve you. It implicates you further. You will be held accountable. The FBI is fully aware of these developments. Your pathetic attempts to evade justice are failing. The charade is over. So again, that was today's police report. Friday's police report is next. It's even shorter. January 24th at 7:05 a.m. PST. To the North Everett Precinct, subject, criminal activity reported, imminent threat of breaking, entering, kidnapping, and illegal enforcement of fraudulent orders. This report serves as formal notification that any attempt to illegally enter my residence at 2120 Highland Ave, number 105, Everett, Washington, 98201, kidnap or otherwise unlawfully detain me, Lynette Renee Hansen, aka Mystic Gwen, particularly if executed on a Friday or during the weekend, will incur a non-negotiable penalty of $10 million. This amount increases to $25 million if these actions disturb my sleep. This includes actions taken directly or through any co-conspirators, including but not limited to Erica and John Owens. Furthermore, any attempt to illegally enforce fraudulent court orders against me will also incur the same penalties. Be advised that I am a designated FBI informant under federal investigation, and any such actions constitute multiple felonies, including potential acts of domestic terrorism. Your pattern of rejecting reports to shield your own criminal conduct is duly noted by the FBI and will be addressed accordingly. Consider yourselves on notice. This is non-negotiable, and the FBI has my full authorization to act accordingly. Now to the YouTube script. Remember, I'm redacting all of the updates. If you would like to read those, you may. You can read the entire transcription of everything I'm stating here on facebook.com/Mystic Gwen Loves Only You. So redacting the updates. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever it is you're reading this or hearing it. I am Lynette Renee Hansen, also known as Mystic Gwen. This broadcast airing on January 27th at 11:11 a.m. PST continues the on.
Correction. It is 9:48 p.m. PST, January 28th, 2025, and you're going to hear me saying it's this morning in a moment because I'm playing the recording.
It's Tuesday, January 28th, 2025, and it is 9:54 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Remember, this is a recording that was made, fortunately, just long enough to record me reading the YouTube live stream script. Thanks to Unit 207's additional counts of obstruction and tampering they added to their indictments yesterday by shutting it off. Back to the recording.
9:49
The ongoing
p.m.
public record of a federal investigation into a sprawling criminal conspiracy. A conspiracy that reaches into the North Everett Precinct of the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office, the Snohomish County Prosecutor's Office, the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, and beyond. Let me be unequivocally clear, I am a designated FBI informant operating under their direct guidance. This live stream is not a personal platform. It is a strategic tool in this federal investigation. The delusion of impunity addressing Unit 207 and their cohorts. Recent intelligence gathered as recently as the 21st indicates that certain individuals, particularly those associated with Unit 207, located directly above my home of 13 years, are laboring under a dangerous and frankly absurd delusion. They believe they can avoid accountability for their extensive list of crimes. They believe they can keep their jobs, destroy my life, and escape the consequences of their actions. They believe that their lies, perjury, fraud, and co-conspirators have somehow shielded them from justice. They are wrong. To the woman in Unit 207 who has been stalking and hacking me since April 2023, justice is coming and it will be swift and decisive. During the live stream conducted earlier in the evening of the 21st, commencing at 9:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, while playing the greetings recording, I paused the playback to orally reiterate a critical point of fact. I stated for the record that as of the close of business day, January 21st, the FBI has confirmed that there are still no lawful or non-fraudulent court orders in existence bearing my legal names from the year 2024 to that date. This statement elicited a distinct and audible reaction from an individual in Unit 207, a woman who expressed audible shock and disbelief at this confirmation. This reaction, captured on the live stream, serves as further evidence of the fraudulent nature of the purported court orders and the individual's reliance on their illegitimate authority. The FBI maintains its position clearly articulated since the end of August 2024 that any and all court orders obtained through this conspiracy are fraudulent, and that those in possession of or attempting to enforce such orders are implicated in the underlying series of felonies, including, but not limited to, conspiracy, fraud, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering. This incident underscores the gravity of the situation and the desperate attempts by the conspirators to cling to a fabricated legal basis for their criminal actions. It also serves to highlight that those in Unit 207 are fully aware of their guilt and that any and all of their attempts to enforce the fraudulent court orders are doing nothing but indicating them further. A pattern of criminality, the North Everett Precinct and the Snohomish County Prosecutor's Office. This conspiracy is not a series of isolated incidents, systemic abuse of power orchestrated by individuals within the North Everett Precinct and facilitated by corrupt officials within the Snohomish County Prosecutor's Office. Their crimes include, but are not limited to, fraud, the calculated manipulation of official processes, including the fabrication of a DCYF referral by Officer Brandon Gill on July 3rd, the fabrication made over a month after the fact in August to further the conspiracy to kidnap my sons and retaliate against my demands for accountability. Obstruction of justice, the repeated rejection of legitimate police reports, a blatant attempt to shield themselves and their accomplices. This includes the refusal to acknowledge officers holding me hostage before the premeditated kidnappings of my sons, and their refusal to accept reports about these kidnappings even after the fact. As of January 20th, 2025, they continue to obstruct justice and reject reports of crimes perpetrated by their officers and their co-conspirators. Keep in mind, at the start of this, we went over 2 police reports, one from Friday and one from today. Those haven't yet been rejected.
Those were rejected this morning, Tuesday, January 28th, after the acquisition of yet another fraudulent order yesterday. You're still 100% liable, and both of those rejections are additional counts. Thank you for further implicating and incriminating your entire precinct. Back to the recording.
Verified.
Based on a pattern of criminal conduct by the North Everett Precinct of Fraudsters, which the FBI renamed the North Everett Precinct of Stalkers this month. Those police reports will be rejected either the same day they perpetrate another remaining felony, like breaking and entering, or the day prior. Deprivation of civil rights, the systematic denial of due process and equal protection under the law guaranteed by the United States Constitution to myself and others. Intimidation and silencing of victims, a concerted effort to instill fear and discourage victims from coming forward. Facilitating stalking, kidnapping, and further crimes. Actively enabling and participating in the stalking of me. and the kidnapping of my children, along with a multitude of other criminal acts. Abuse of a disabled minor. The intentional disruption of my son's routines, causing emotional distress, particularly to my son with autism, and hindering their development through their campaign of harassment and illegal actions. This abuse occurred over 12 times, despite their being informed of the potential consequences prior to their escalation of harassment. Their decision to kidnap my sons, and their attempts to change custody in a deluded attempt to shield themselves
from their looming convictions.
Custodial interference / kidnapping, conspiring with my children's father, a multiple times convicted stalker and abuser. And my extortionist mother to threaten
and kidnap my sons.
This also includes the neighbors who, according to the FBI,
are guilty of stalking me,
i.e. North Everett Precinct, DCYF. Every individual in Unit 207, Snohomish County prosecutors, per the FBI,
will all be charged accordingly.
Aiding and abetting the actions of various employees of DCYF and other agencies and institutions have aided and abetted this criminal enterprise. They have been instrumental in furthering the conspiracy through their actions,
their silence, and their willingness to follow unlawful directives.
The Snohomish County Prosecutor's Office in particular has played a central and key role in this conspiracy. At least 2 prosecutors within this office are facing federal disbarment.
A testament to the depth of their corruption.
The events of August 23rd and September 26th. Let me be clear about some specific incidents involving law enforcement misconduct. August 23rd, 2024, 2 officers from the North Everett Precinct, along with 2 DCYF employees and Erica Owens, were dispatched to my residence.
Their purpose was to facilitate the illegal, premeditated kidnappings of my sons.
They refused to take reports regarding the hostage situation or the threats, and they aided and abetted the kidnapping. September 26, 2024, another officer from the North Everett Precinct arrived with individuals identified by the FBI as felons. Officer moved private property to stalk me, peered into my living room, and
attempted to illegally enter my residence.
On a
YouTube live stream. You can watch it. It's public.
To those who have participated in this conspiracy, from the officers of the North Everett Precinct to the corrupt prosecutors in the Snohomish County Prosecutor's Office, to the individuals actively stalking me right this very moment in Unit 207, and their network of accomplices. There is no immunity for your crimes. You will be held accountable individually and collectively for every illegal act,
every violation of public trust,
and every moment of suffering you have inflicted. The woman in Unit 207 who believes she can escape justice by recruiting someone to take the fall for her, your delusion is staggering. There is no escape from the consequences of your actions. You face over 80 years in prison, and your desperate attempts to manipulate others will only add to your crimes. To any potential recruits,
a stark warning.
To anyone considering joining this conspiracy or aiding these individuals in any way, do not be fooled.
Do not be fooled.
I repeat, do not be fooled.
Do not be fooled.
One more time. Do not be fooled.
Do not be fooled.
You will not be shielded from prosecution. You will not be rewarded for your loyalty to criminals. You will face the full force of federal law,
and you will share in the consequences.
The individuals in Unit 207 are not offering you an opportunity.
They are offering you a prison sentence. They are not your friends.
They are not your friends. They are manipulators who will willingly sacrifice you to save themselves. The FBI is watching. The evidence is overwhelming. The only path to potential leniency is to disassociate yourself from these criminals immediately. Drive down to the Seattle FBI field office today, right now, and surrender.
Amen. Do not be fooled.
Reiteration of key legal points. I reiterate for the record. No lawful court orders. There are no lawful court orders bearing my name, Lynette Renee Hansen, or Mystic Wynn, in existence from 2024 to the present date. Any claims to the contrary are fraudulent, and any attempts to enforce such orders are illegal. Lack of personal service. I have not been personally served with any legal documents since February 2023, nor have I filed a notice of pro se appearance in any case. Illegal detention. I remain illegally detained within my own home. Financial damages. The conspirators are liable for substantial financial damages exceeding $14 million as outlined in my tort claim filed on August 14th, 2024, and case number 10-500-5934. They are also liable for $100,000 for each day they have illegally detained me since August 6th, and $1 million for each instance of stalking, attempted illegal entry, and attempted enforcement of fraudulent court orders. However, little caveat here that's not in the script. As the FBI had me inform you imbeciles on Friday, and again today, the
price has gone up.
$10 million if you show up and break in while I'm awake.
25.
25.
If you disrupt
wake the fuck
my
up.
sleep.
That's $1 million. Okay, back to the script.
Do not be fooled.
Instructions in recording a legal fortress. As instructed by the FBI, my front door has remained closed since January 2nd and/or 3rd and will remain closed indefinitely. If any individual attempts to illegally enter my residence, I am instructed to remain seated. Aim my cameras and YouTube live stream at the door and windows. Say nothing other than to demand the $10 million or $25 million that they owe. And to play the recording that is titled 1-2-11:57 p.m. Greetings to the 36 plus non-immune people currently illegally on my private property. This recording serves as a formal legal notification and an irrefutable piece of evidence. Per the FBI, it's as legally binding as if you pled guilty just for showing up to hear the recording.
Verified.
Live stream protocol section. This is another one I'm going to redact most of. It's a bit overkill. The first two sentences sum up what the whole paragraph is about, and the rest of it is basically the FBI saying to Unit 207, you're going to go to prison if you keep doing this stupid shit. So we'll just read a couple lines from that. Again, you can read the whole thing in full on facebook.com/mysticwinless-only-you. Live stream protocol section. Furthermore, let the record reflect that any interruption of this live stream absent my explicit oral statement indicating the precise end time and confirming the commencement of a new live stream within 90 seconds or less constitutes unlawful obstruction of justice and evidence tampering. Redacting the rest of it for reading purposes. No consent to strip searches. In the event that the FBI allows my kidnapping, unlawful arrest, or unlawful committal, I will not consent to any strip searches under any circumstances. I will remain in my current attire until my release. After that, there is an update from January 23rd at 10:43 p.m. PST. I'm redacting that. And then after that, there's an update from January 21st at 11:03 p.m. PST. I'm redacting that just for reading purposes. Conclusion. The end is near. The conspiracy is unraveling. The perpetrators are facing the consequences of their actions. The FBI's investigation is nearing its final stage. To those who have abused their power, obstructed justice, and terrorized me and my family, your time is up. You will be held accountable. To those who have been used and manipulated, you still have a chance to do the right thing. Cooperate with the FBI. Remember, everybody, on September 15th, there were 27 people facing federal imprisonment. Since then, around 20 people have blown the whistle. The FBI has stated since December there's now only 7 to 9 people facing federal imprisonment.
That's pretty good.
That's way better than 27. So again, to those who have been used and manipulated, you still have a chance to do the right thing. Cooperate with the FBI. You can literally find the email address to the Seattle FBI field office on Google. You can call them. You can drive down to Seattle and walk into their fucking office. Do it. To the public, this case is a testament to the importance of vigilance, the power of documentation, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. The FBI has stated that they intend to use my case to set a precedent and that those involved will reap what they have sown. Thank you. It's now 11:28 a.m. p.m. It is now 10:12 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Tuesday, January 28th, 2020.
It's actually 10:06 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, still Tuesday, January 28th.
25. Two things we're going to go over really quickly. One, again, the FBI has me on instructions to give a tour of my house every 24 hours. That happened in the preceding live stream around 9:40-ish a.m. Two, we are now going to play the greetings recording as the FBI has stipulated for me to do. This is also a recording from a different date. It's from January 2nd, and the FBI had me timestamp it for evidentiary and legal purposes that I don't fucking know. I don't know. So I'm going to play it, and it's going to say, oh, it's January 2nd, and it's 11:57 p.m., but it is not. It is January 28th. Also, Nerd Squad, I took a screenshot. The YouTube interface is reflecting as 167 videos set for public consumption. There is a selfie I took of myself last week that is visible as the thumbnail. And here's the greetings recording. Remember, the FBI has consistently said since the day that they made me make this recording, that this recording, quote, says it all, quote. So for the final time, do not be fooled. It is 11:58 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Thursday, January 2nd, 2025. This is a live stream per the FBI's instructions of my new door greeting that I'm to save and to play for those people who are going to prison that have plans involving, once again, actively stalking me outside of my building. I don't know if this is tomorrow or multiple times over from tomorrow to Wednesday, just that the FBI has informed me to do so. So, in the event that you're hearing this, you're in front of my private property. Stop where you are. You are being recorded. By agreeing to come here, you are agreeing to be charged with obstruction of justice. You are agreeing to be charged with witness tampering. You are agreeing to be charged with stalking. You are agreeing to be charged with criminal trespass. You are agreeing to be charged with ADA violations. You are agreeing to be charged with civil rights violations. You are agreeing to be charged with conspiring with others to deprive me of my civil rights, U.S. Code 42, Section 1985, and any of the crimes listed on the signs posted on my property. Let me be clear, you have no immunity for your actions. Any claims of immunity are fraudulent, just like every court order with my names, Lynette Renee Hansen or Mystic Gwen, from 2024 to January 2nd, 2025. The FBI has confirmed that there are no... Just going to pause the greetings recording and point out what the FBI has clarified.
There are no court orders, including the one that Unit 207 received directly or with their co-conspirators yesterday at around noonish, that they feel provide them with the impunity needed to perpetrate their remaining felonies that have been reported for over a year. Because there is not a single court order that's been issued in 2024 or in 2025 that isn't directly correlated to this conspiracy, and those of you who are going to prison. Verified. Back to the greetings recording.
No lawful court orders with either of my names from that time period. If you choose to knock on my door or to continue standing on my private property, you are choosing to harass me and stalk me. And if you are attempting to goad me into opening my door to pull off another crime, be aware that you are making yourself
Personally liable.
You will be forced to pay me directly from your severance, your 401k,
and any assets that need to be liquidated.
That will need to be liquidated. No position, excluding the FBI, has any immunity in this situation. I strongly advise you to verify this information with the FBI. Unless
you and your associates are some of the felons going to prison for the rest of their lives.
Due to the crime spree of the North Everett Precinct of fraudsters, Snohomish County Prosecutor's Office, dwindling Department of Child Abusers moonlighting as child protectors, my multiple times convicted stalker and abuser, the extortionist,
Anne-Marie et al.
If you are unable to get verification on anything you have being fraudulent,
it is because of your and their looming incarceration and soon to be unsealed indictments.
Now get off my fucking private property and refrain from further crimes.
As the signs on my exterior have stipulated for over a year.
It is now 10:13 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Nerd Squad, the interface is reflecting as 169 videos set for public consumption, but it was reflecting as that over an hour ago when I took a screenshot of it. So at some point, Unit 207 will need to adjust the interface to reflect that there's 170 videos set for public consumption. A selfie that I took of myself a couple of weeks ago is visible, and I'm clicking on this live stream to make sure there's audio throughout the live stream. Clicking on this live stream to make sure there's audio throughout the live stream. Clicking on stream to make sure there's audio throughout
the whole time.
Unless my instructions
he was
change.
a magnet.
On Friday evening, these individuals, including both male and female officers,
Just long enough to record me reading the YouTube live streams.
speaking of me and the kidnapping of my children. The woman in Unit 207 who believes she can seek justice by recruiting someone to take the fall for her. Your delusion is staggering.
We have audio.
40-ish a.m. We are now going to play the greetings report.
We've got audio. It's 10:14 p.m. PST. I was listening to Theo Vaughn's latest podcast episode with Cat Williams. I'm like halfway through it. It's from today. I'm going to resume it. It's on Spotify.
He was already a millionaire, and so I couldn't initially understand what kept driving him, because it just seemed to me like he was never happy, because every time I would see him, he had achieved like 30 new things and had purchased like 100 new things, and still yet he was working like he didn't,
Yeah.
And I probably was just not understanding what work ethic was, you know. But yeah, I learned a lot from that guy. I met Shaq when I was 16.
Damn, where at, you think?
Nowhere. In Orlando, his rookie year.
Yeah, because he played at LSU, man.
Yeah, great guy. Great guy.
Hey, Shaq.
Yeah, right.
Dude, if I was that big, I couldn't get my big ass out of bed at that size, man. It'd be so hard to, hard, because sometimes it's kind of hard at even a regular size.
I don't believe that.
Dude, you know how hard it is to get a big old look at it right there. It's so hard to get up when you big.
Right.
I watch my aunt get up sometime, like, she ain't gonna get up. You know what I'm talking about? You ever see somebody and you're like, she ain't gonna get up.
That's when
they figure it out.
When all of the places were catching on fire, that was my first thought, was like, nobody on my 600-pound life is gonna make it out of none of this. Like, what? Like,
yeah, that show's over, bro.
Like, there's a whole portion of the population that can't get up.
Yeah.
Like, everybody's like, evacuate. And somebody just shit in the bed. I did evacuate.
Yeah. They evacuate, they just look the other way. That's their evacuating. Just lean away from the warm.
Flip the pillow.
Yeah. Did you what did you and Prince do? Y'all go to eat or nothing? Like, what did you like to do? Because he's
no. So, like, you know how some people have chefs? Like, he was beyond that. Like, he wanted a chef to know what he was preparing. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but like, he wasn't vegan the whole time I knew him, you know. He was just vegan for this portion. But before that, he had a whole different thing. But he would have an Italian chef to make Italian, and that's what he was having. And he, like, to the extreme.
He was extreme.
Like, yeah. So, you know, you would get the most beautiful meals around this dude because he was a foodie. So, you know.
Damn. I'd love to watch him eat a little snack or something, a little creme brulee or a little big scoop of ice cream. I'd love to see that because he was kind of smaller, wasn't he?
I'm 5'5", so it never really factored in.
I'm bigger than him, I think.
Yeah, but I'm saying I wasn't gazing at him while he was eating. Yeah, we always had enough women around. Yeah. I wasn't there in a longing fashion.
Yeah, sorry. Somehow I just like watch a small person if they get up against a real hard scoop of ice cream, they fucking can't handle that bitch, you know.
No, I didn't get it.
Yeah,
rewind that again.
Sorry.
Somehow I missed that, and I can't accept it.
No, I just sometimes if somebody, I know like if I get up, if it's a real cold scoop of ice cream and it's hard to, get with a spoon or something, I just imagine like a smaller guy battling that bitch, bro.
Oh shit!
So that's what I
want you to acknowledge how funny that
was. I just want to envision in my head, Prince. Just got 2 or 3 spoons going on that bit. He gonna get in there.
He'd want your ass in here.
He probably would have. Blessings, man.
I know. Had to pull him off.
He's a purple superhero, and he is the king, man.
In real life, yeah.
I'm just joking, Prince. If your spirit is here, I'm sure it is somewhere.
It is indeed, yeah. And he had a great sense of humor.
Oh, I saw him stop in. I was in Minneapolis. They used to have this place called
And he got more pussy than you.
Did he? Yeah. Oh yeah, of course he did. What the fuck am I talking about? Yeah, it took me half a second to realize that. Yeah, of course he did. Damn, boy. Yeah. Well, no, they had a place though that he would go perform sometimes on a certain night. It was in Minneapolis, and a lot of musicians would just show up. And one night he showed up there, man, and it was amazing. It was just random people would get together and play. But
no, he loved that probably more than anything else. Like he loved that more than touring. He loved that more than anything is jam sessions, and he had places all over the globe, and he was welcomed at. I'm saying, you're talking about a guy that played 26 instruments. You feel what I'm saying? Like, we're talking about a guy that, like, most people, yeah.
It's magical, huh?
If you could learn from what he did, then you just pass learning. You know what I mean? Like, the shit resonates regardless of what it is you're trying to do.
Right.
And so, yeah, I was blessed to
even be around him, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Just to be able to witness a short, young Black guy navigate the highest echelons of entertainment and still be holding on to things that he doesn't do and won't do, and still feeling like he needs to look out for other musicians and other artists, and still trying not to bring shame on his fans or other Black people or music lovers, or just a wonderful human. That's what you can learn.
Shit, now I feel bad about making that joke, but I feel okay still. I mean, I feel
you should.
It's okay.
Yeah,
I'm just joking.
Yeah.
Yeah. But did when you were growing up, did you ever have like a TV, like a TV father kind of, like I had, like, I'm trying to think of like influences that you had when you were young. Like I had like Little House on the Prairie was a show I would watch that they had. Michael Landon was on it. And then they had like In the Heat of the Night. I really liked that show.
Now wait a minute.
I'm trying.
Who was the father figure on In the Heat of the Night?
Oh,
was the Black guy your father figure?
Who? Virgil Tibbs?
Virgil Tibbs.
Yeah, brother, he was good. I will tell you this: I met his wife at or not his wife, but
the lady that played him.
Yes, that's her right there. Virgil and Sophia was his wife in the show, I think.
She was way smaller than you thought, right?
She was very beautiful, and I saw her at a breakfast place, and I was like, I cannot go back in there and tell her, and I did, and it was she. I think she kind of appreciated it, but it was still pretty awkward, I think. But she's very beautiful. But yeah, I liked him, and Carol O'Connor was in it. But in the heat of my heat. Right. That shit was good. I loved that. What else did I like? I'm trying to think of a show where I had like a TV dad. Did you have like a TV family or someone that you kind of liked?
As a Black man, I had a real father. So I wasn't looking at TV for the images of a real good Black father, because I had one. You know what I mean? So for me, it was a little interesting just to see how other fathers were portrayed, And, I more enjoyed like seeing the dynamics of other families and how things went for them, because that's the only way that I knew, I don't have that type of upbringing at all. Wow, that's I didn't even know my mother was supposed to love me. Like I didn't know that.
Sorry to laugh, man. Yeah.
She's never kissed me in my life. I didn't know she was supposed to like me like that. I'm saying. She made sure I ate, but I had clean clothes. But I'm saying I didn't.
It'd have been shocking if my mom was always working. I would be like, Mom, tell me you love me. She'd be like, I gotta move this box over here. That's what she would be like. I'm like, Mom, how do you feel about me? She's like, oh, we got to put all these boxes away. She always had something to do, you know. Like if a feeling came up, my mom just couldn't have it, you know. No,
right.
I love you, Mom. It's funny. Now it's funny.
Right. But now you can.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. I'm like, Mom, how do you feel about me? She's like, we got to get this car to start. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Where's the vacuum? Right.
Yeah, that was it. That's what I think. That's what I always was looking for me.
But these are the things that guarantee success. That's what I'm telling you.
Yeah.
It's part of what's on that list that, you know, you've got certain things against you. You're going to be successful.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to be in a position where you can rectify things. You know that you're way more appreciative of love because of that. You're in a position where you can still be loved, you know, by the black lady at the airport.
Yeah.
2025.
My little layover lady. That's what I call her, my little layover. I've seen you. This is something that I thought. There's only two things that I think that I've seen, and I'm not sure. One of them was that Santa Claus, when I was a kid, that they brought us outside and they had a real sleigh go by in the air. It was an airplane that they disguised as a sleigh in our town. Mm-hmm. The second one is I thought I saw you riding bikes down Sunset Boulevard.
Right. So now the funniest part of all of that.
True story.
It's because all of your stories are true, right? But the whole thing is, when you're telling this story, we ride by on these bikes with lights on them.
Yeah, like from the future.
Circus members. Really, this is $1.5 million worth of Can-Am spiders. Oh, 8 of them, 200,000 a piece. Me and Shug going down Sunset.
Oh yeah, I didn't see those, man. I'm sorry. I saw some bitches. Somebody covered them bitches.
Cat Williams came by and with a shuttling pony. And they had neon lights on the hooves.
Somebody spray painted silly string on the back of it.
With a violin. Start playing.
Yeah, I swear to God, I'm standing on the porch. I look over there.
Right.
And you had done one of those things where you stand up but keep, you know what I'm saying? It's just, you know, when you're riding down the street.
I'm 5'5", so I do that better than most.
Okay. And I said, damn, there he goes, bro.
Right.
And by the time I get anybody's attention, nobody believed me. So that's why I think it had a lot of that same, like when you saw Santa, you know, type of energy.
Right.
Well,
understand, I didn't take away from the myth. I just clarified.
Yeah. No, good. I thought I was crazy for thinking that.
Right.
What do you see happening in 2025, Kat? This is where we get to where, like, what do you feel like? What do you feel like are things we can look forward to, things we can stay conscious of? Can I bum another cigarette by chance, man?
Absolutely. Yeah, so
let me get that bitch, get my lungs up.
We're already in 2025, aren't we?
Yeah.
So
you right already.
Yeah. See? So the whole thing is we're not this thing does not happen in yearly cycles. Like it's not a every 12 months thing. That's not how it works. So the age of truth is not 1 year. It's the beginning of people having more of a thirst for what is true than an appetite for lies. So if you sell lies, it's a harder road for you. If you have truths to tell, people are hungry for that, and they'll pay you handsomely to hear the truth. Wasn't always that way. It's that way right now in real time. Whatever that means to you. That's the battle that's going on. It's people who profit from the manipulation of others by getting you to believe something that's not the case. And that's how they make their living. And it is now a difficult time for those entities.
Do you think that there is actual cloning going on?
We know that there's actual cloning going on. The question I believe you're asking is human cloning.
Oh, yes, sir.
But let's start with the real question. The real question is cloning going on? Yeah, it is.
I knew it.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying, let's just say animal cloning.
Oh,
right?
yes.
Let's start there. That's not a myth or
no, that's
not a conspiracy theory that we are at the point where we have no problem cloning animals. If you lose a pet, you can send away to these companies and they'll
fucking remix that bitch and send it back.
All right.
Yeah.
At as close a proximity as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Right? That we know is possible. Okay. So now
through Viagen Pets right there.
So that's in the animal world. So now in the human world, we know that there are multiple surgeries that we know we can replace this with that. All the way up to what's our last achievement? Is it heart? The guy passed away with a pig heart, but it worked for, I'm saying.
Let me see that. Bring up that pig-hearted guy. Right there.
Yeah. Two people have received a
genetically modified pig heart transplant. David Bennett and Lawrence Fawcett. Both were performed in Maryland.
So there's not,
the evidence is there,
very much left on what it would take as far as abilities go. So
do you think there's any artists now that you think are not the same artists that we thought they were?
If we're only speaking of biology, I've heard that a man's G-spot is in his anal passage, which means I'm going to go my whole life without ever experiencing it.
Yeah.
By the same token, everybody is a reflection of what they got to go through to get to where they at, right? And I just know that the people that have been in positions where they decided to do some stuff that they said they weren't going to do, they don't be the same on the other side. Nothing they can do can make them seem like what you remember them as.
Have you ever?
I call it spiritual because I don't know what else to call it.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Have you ever faced that in your own life where people try to come at you for offers like that? Do you think that?
Switching podcast.
Put on Manuel's letter there, the Spanish were very happy about this news.
You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
2025 is now upon us. I hope everyone had a great New Year's, but now it's time to start thinking about our New Year's resolutions. Every year I make a lot of big promises to myself, and rarely do I end up keeping all of them. Several years back, though, I made a resolution to save more money, and that's been working out great ever since, which is thanks to today's sponsor, Acorns. Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing so your money has a chance to grow for you, your kids, and your retirement. You don't need to be an expert. Acorns will recommend a diversified portfolio that fits you and your money goals. You don't need to be rich. Acorns lets you invest with the spare money you've got right now. You can start with $5 or even just your spare change. When I started using Acorns years ago now, that's exactly what I did. I set up an account, invested $5, and that took all of about 5 minutes. So if you've got a New Year's resolution to save money and give that money a chance to grow, head to acorns.com/pirate or download the Acorns app and start saving and investing for your future today. Paid non-client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/pirate. Today's episode is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon, including our Commodore class. That's Commodores Kane, Kinway, Hefe, Jennings, Two Gun Tony, Drunken Dak, Antonio, the Pirate Nopales, Matthew the Navigator, Bull, Vertigon, Conifalende, Rumgut, and Bootstrap Spade. Hello. Welcome to the Pirate History Podcast. My name is Matt. Thank you for listening. The Second Coming by W.B. Yeats is among the most influential and well-known poems of the 20th century. It's one of my personal favorites, and I don't think I'm alone in it. If you're familiar with the poem, you'll see allusions pop up in literature and music all over the place. It was written 100 years ago, in 1919, in the wake of World War I. That war held horrors enough to inspire a poem about the end of the world, but the war was only part of the story. There was the global flu pandemic that held the world in its grip. There was civil war in Russia and Yugoslavia and Estonia. The Soviets were conquering all of Eastern Europe. England was at war in Afghanistan, and there were socialist and anarchist movements in revolt all over the world, in France, Germany, and the US, as well as Argentina. Added to all of that, W.B. Yeats was Irish, and in 1919, it means the Irish War of Independence. That war would tear Ireland apart, and all of that horror was, in one way or another, tied to World War I. All of those tertiary events seemed poised to shatter the fragile post-war peace. So let's look at the opening lines of The Second Coming. Yeats writes, quote, "Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falcon. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold." End quote. It's the word gyre that interests me here. And if I slip up and say gyre with a hard G today, let's just move on. But a gyre is a vortex, essentially. When I think about spirals, hurricanes and tornadoes are climatic gyres. Crippling depression is an emotional gyre. Metaphorically, the widening gyre in the poem is often interpreted as the worldwide social and political concerns spiraling out of control. This is why Yeats would write about the end of the world. And I've been thinking about that poem a lot. Mostly because I've been reading about oceanic wind patterns. The largest of these, wind patterns that shape global climate, are called gyres. And I was familiar with the word from the Yeats poem, but I'd never heard it in real use before. But today we're going to be talking about the Pacific gyres. In particular, we'll be talking about 3 famous Pacific voyages that made use of them. Those of William Dampier, Francis Drake and Ferdinand Magellan. This is episode 120, the Saturnalia of Feasting and Lovemaking. In a show about pirates, topics like wind currents can kind of fall by the wayside. They aren't exactly swashbuckling fare, but part of what I want to try to do is to put you in the shoes of the pirates. It wasn't all rum and sword fights and freedom. I mean, there was rum and sword fights and freedom, but there was also wind patterns. The humdrum day-to-day minutia of sailing life was a real concern for the pirates. Now, I'm not going to be spending a lot of time on any of this, but it matters today. See, we're going to be looking at the similarities between Drake and Magellan and Danvers crossings, as well as the differences. And I mean, things like the gyres only kind of matter, really, but we'll get to that in a minute. Let's begin with Ferdinand Magellan. He was Portuguese by birth, a minor noble's son. As a boy, he served as page to the Queen of Portugal. But this was the dawn of the age of sail. Social advancement was earned at sea. And Magellan's story really begins almost exactly where we left off last time, in the decisive Battle of Douro. Magellan's first voyage to the East Indies was under that 7th Portuguese India Armada, the Armada of Francisco de Almeida, and Magellan fought in the Battle of Douro, alongside his cousin, Francisco Serrao. Now, Serrao would go on to lead an expedition eastward to find the Spice Islands. Meanwhile, though, Ferdinand Magellan sailed back home to Portugal. He did so to pitch an idea. Magellan believed that there was still a viable westward route to Asia, and he wanted the permission and money to find it. But King Manuel I of Portugal was not interested. They had a sea route already, so why bother with another one? Magellan, he fell out of favor. He received a few job offers, but they were small-time fare, nothing compared to his ambition. So eventually, the King of Portugal gave him permission to put his idea before King Charles of Spain. Now, King Charles had a vested interest in exploring the boundaries of his American holdings. He wanted very much to know what lay on the other side. I mean, who knows what was out there? Islands made entirely of gold? And, if Marco Polo's writings could be believed, and they couldn't, there were palaces built entirely of solid gold in Eastern Asia. And that might just be on the other side of the Americas. He wanted the opportunity to claim as much of the East Indies as he could before the Portuguese got their hands on all of it. I mean, gold and silver are nice and all, but have you tried nutmeg? What about cinnamon, pepper, and mace? I mean, the spices that the East Indies had to offer were invaluable. Well, not exactly. They were extremely valuable. But it wasn't just the spices. There was silver, and rubies and gold, and women. Attractive, exotic women. Women who could be converted to Catholicism, properly covered up, married to good Spanish men, and have good Catholic babies. Which, kind of was a big part of their purpose. They were trying to spread the Catholic faith around the world. So Magellan convinced King Charles to outfit an armada for the purpose of circumnavigating the globe. Magellan thought Asia was just on the other side of the Americas. Maybe China's just a hop, skip, and a jump away from Brazil. They brought more food than they would need for a voyage like that, though, which, was lucky. The voyage consisted of 5 ships, and the 3 that were worth noting here were the flagship Trinidad, under Magellan himself, the San Antonio, under Juan de Cartagena, and the Santiago, under another Serrao brother, another of Magellan's cousins. And we should also note a Spanish convict named Juan Sebastian Elcano, who signed up for the voyage in hopes of a pardon from the king. Now, the fleet was mostly Spanish, but Magellan and Serrao did bring a number of Portuguese adventurers along on the voyage, and many of the commanders, due to the voyage being organized by Magellan, were Portuguese. Now, Juan de Cartagena was Spanish and third in overall command of the voyage, and all of that matters. The ships were provisioned with wine and tack and livestock and almonds, and a dried jelly that was rich in vitamin C. This would hold off the scurvy that nobody really knew about yet, but not forever. The fleet headed for Brazil and made landfall at Rio de Janeiro. This wasn't Magellan's first stop at Brazil. He had stopped there on his voyage to the East Indies earlier in his career. And some of his crew had been there before, but not everyone. Those that had been there talked up the many charms that they would find in Brazil. And there's practical reasons to stop at the river. The water and food and wood that they took on was a necessity, and the locals were prolific traders that made a good profit in those trades. But, that's for the quartermasters and the captains. The regular sailors were much more interested in the women of Rio de Janeiro. And they actually got amazingly lucky here. The region had been ripped in a drought for 2 months. But the dry broke, and the rain arrived at almost the same moment that Magellan did. Were the Spanish and Portuguese wizards who brought the rain? Were they loved by the gods? Were they extraordinarily lucky men who were sure to father children with similar blessings? None of that was probably true. What, were they going to dissuade the local women from thinking that was the case? Absolutely not. Imagine that you're a young man, about 16 to 22. You're unmarried, you're from a deeply religious culture, and you've been on board a ship with only men for about a month now. You're rowing to shore amid a tropical downpour, and all of a sudden you see dozens of women running to shore to frolic in the rain and surf. And they're not wearing any clothing. When you finally make landfall, these women run out to greet you and wrap their arms around your neck and plant kisses on you. And come nightfall, the local leaders throw an opulent feast for you and your men. And everyone enjoys what Ian Cameron called, quote, the Saturnalia of feasting and lovemaking. That sounds pretty great, doesn't it? I mean, who doesn't want to travel to Rio for Festival, to drink exotic drinks, to eat exotic foods, and to sup on exotic snacks? That's precisely why many of the men on this voyage had signed up in the first place. It was the selling point when the crew masters were recruiting. Adventure and money and women. And, maybe they'll even pay for college. But now, the desires for adventure and women were sated. They'd seen new parts of the world on the other side of the globe, and they even had enough Brazil wood in their holds for them to have a paycheck back home. They could spend that money on drinks while telling all of their friends about the crazy time they had on their semester abroad. A lot of the men were ready to return to Spain, but they couldn't go. They'd only just begun their voyage. That Atlantic crossing was only a taste of what they had in store here. Many of the men began to grumble, and a few of the Spanish officers started to take note. Juan de Cartagena, the top-ranking Spaniard in the fleet, third in overall command, well, in the eyes of the Spanish, Cartagena was really in charge. I mean, after all, this was a Spanish fleet outfitted by the King of Spain on a voyage of discovery for Spain. And we could speculate all day about clandestine meetings between shadowy power brokers back in Spain and officers on this voyage. We could think about bags of silver from Spanish lords and premeditated coups, but we don't have any proof of any of that. What we know is that shortly after Rio, Cartagena attempted a mutiny. No, that didn't go well. He didn't have the support he expected here. So Cartagena found himself arrested and slapped in the brig. Now, a man of lesser birth, of lesser standing than Juan de Cartagena, probably would have been killed, but you didn't kill a powerful noble like Juan de Cartagena. So the voyage moved on. But as they went further south, conditions grew too cold and too icy to continue. So Magellan chose instead to winter on the coast of South America. Now, a lot has been made about the similarities between the mutiny on this voyage and the mutiny faced by Francis Drake. And any similarities that are there are at best superficial. Both events happened on or around the southern half of South America on the first and second voyages of circumnavigation. But really, that's about it. The mutiny faced by Francis Drake was hardly a mutiny at all. It was a fabricated, Machiavellian power move that was intended to secure his control over the voyage and prove that he would kill anyone who questioned him. Frankly, it was a kind of a boss pirate move. But on the other hand, Magellan faced an organized coup perpetrated by the Spanish leaders in his company to wrest control away from him and the Portuguese. Cartagena had allies among the Spanish officers, and he was spreading discontent among the Spanish crew. While they were at anchor, waiting out the winter, a number of Spanish crewmen took control of 3 of the ships in the fleet. And those 3 surrounded Magellan's 2. Now, they didn't want to attack Magellan's ships. There were innocent men on board, both Portuguese and Spanish. They also didn't want to risk wasting resources that were on board those ships or damaging 2 of the king's own vessels. Instead, they hoped that Magellan would surrender. Then they could put Cartagena in as the admiral, and Magellan could stay on as captain, and they could continue the voyage in peace. But in the night, a pinnace that was on patrol drew too close to one of Magellan's ships. He captured it quietly, subdued the sailors, and dressed his own men in their clothing. Then he sent the patrolling sailors back to one of the mutinous ships, where they claimed to have important information about Magellan. They were allowed on board, and once on board, they arrested the mutinous officers, stabbed the captain to death, and took control of the ship. Once in command, they raised a certain flag, surreptitiously, that would signal Magellan that they'd taken command without alerting the other mutinous vessels. Magellan maneuvered his 2 ships into what would have otherwise been a suicidal position. The 2 ships still under mutinous control didn't know what had happened, though, so they prepared to attack Magellan. But then the ship that had just been taken over opened fire on her former allies. The mutineers in command on the last 2 vessels knew that they'd been outplayed. They surrendered. They held a trial on shore for all of the mutineers. 2 of the captains were drawn and quartered, and then their bodies were put on display. Think of the rack, those X-shaped crosses on which bodies were placed for flame. That's where they were displayed. According to Francis Drake, who would find the gibbets several decades later, some of their bones were still hanging in place there. However, Juan de Cartagena was the ringleader. He was still far too well born to be executed and left to rot on a foreign shore. Instead, he was given a small share of food. He was accompanied by a friendly priest, and the 2 of them were left alone on an island. Cartagena was never heard from again.
Shop now at the Home Depot and get up to 35% off select appliances. Plus, save up to an extra $400 on select appliances like Frigidaire. From the stainless steel French door refrigerator with crisp steel drawers to keep produce fresh longer, to the 5-burner electric range that lets you cook more at once and get meals on the table faster. Right now, get up to 35% off select appliances like Frigidaire. The Home Depot. How doers get more done. Pricing valid January 9th to January 29th. US only. See store online for details. Minimum purchase required.
Everybody shush! William Shatner has something to say.
Cat and Jethro, box of oddities.
What do you do when the woman you love dies? Well, of course, you dig her up and you live with her.
Aww.
The show examines weird things.
There are plenty of old photographs from this time period of children out in the streets playing in and among the dead horse carcasses.
Oh, I miss those days. Things used to be so much simpler.
Cat and Jethro.
Then there's the urine wheel, which sounds like a really bad game show.
They've done weird things. Cat and Jethro, box of oddities. That is really mysterious.
Join Cat and Jethro Gilligan Toth for the strange, the bizarre, the unexpected, as they lift the lid and cautiously peer inside the box of oddities.
The Webby Award-winning Box of Oddities podcast from Airwave Media.
The rest of the traitors, the regular crewmen who were behind the mutiny, were pardoned. They were only allowed to go free on the condition that they would not carry any weapons and that they would do the worst of the work. They careened the vessels, they cleaned the bilge, they did all of the jobs that no one else wanted to do. But that's still better than execution. Juan Sebastian Elcano was among the pardoned prisoners. Once it was warm enough to move on, they began the voyage again. Now, the discovery and navigation of the Strait of Magellan was a thrilling, death-defying affair, but we're not going to discuss it in depth here. It took a month of navigation through the route. Magellan lost one of his ships en route, probably to a mutiny, as the crew would arrive in Spain some 7 months later. Their former captain was in chains, and those men were arrested and put on trial. But on 28 November 1520, Magellan's fleet emerged into the bosom of the open ocean. This ocean was still called the Southern Ocean when it was given a name at all. No one had named it yet. At least, no Europeans had given it a name yet. And they didn't have really a concept of how big it was. Ferdinand Magellan noted the calm waters and the steady winds. He called them Pacifico. Now, this isn't one of those moments where the main character turns to the camera and says with a wink, "This truly is a Pacific Ocean." Magellan was just describing the character of the ocean. It was calm and peaceful. It was Pacifico. It wouldn't actually be called the Pacific Ocean for about another 300 years. Instead, the Spanish and Portuguese called it Mar de Magalhães, or the Sea of Magellan. The Dutch, English, and French were not going to follow suit, though, especially after the Reformation and the schism that happened in Europe. The convention among their sailors, the mostly Protestant sailors, and thus most of the pirates, including Francis Drake and William Dampier, was to call this the Southern Ocean. It was actually Dampier's voyage through the Strait of Magellan and across the Pacific that took the first steps toward the new name. He reported wind patterns in the ocean. But it wasn't until the late 18th century that it became clear they needed a distinction between the Southern Ocean and the Antarctic Ocean. It would be stupid to keep calling it the Southern Ocean when there was another ocean further south. So it was renamed the Pacific in honor of Ferdinand Magellan's first arrival there. But Magellan, ignorant of the distance he had to cross, set his heading north-northwest almost immediately after leaving the strait. This proved to be a mistake that later Pacific seafarers all knew better than to make. And now we need to return to the discussion of gyres for just a moment. The Southern Pacific gyre is a counterclockwise wind pattern between Australia and South America. The Northern Pacific gyre is a clockwise wind pattern between Asia and North America. Now, both patterns blow west at the equator. There's also a countercurrent at the equator that carries ships to the east, and this creates something of an equatorial oceanic highway. It's how nearly all ships traverse the Pacific Ocean for centuries. It's the single most expeditious route across the ocean, unless you had business elsewhere for some reason. When Francis Drake crossed the Pacific on the second circumnavigation, he sailed north all the way to Oregon. And then he caught the North Pacific gyre south to the equator. When William Dampier and Charles Swan set out, they departed from Mexico, also to catch the winds south to the equator. Magellan, on the other hand, set sail directly from the Strait of Magellan. Had Magellan known better, he could have sailed north along the coast of South America to catch the current. He would have at the very least given himself access to wood and fresh water. Magellan didn't know better. Instead, he just sailed through the Southern Pacific Ocean for 2 months. His men began to suffer from hunger, and thirst, and scurvy. That vitamin C jelly they had ran out fast. Magellan was sailing through what's called Polynesia today, which is an island group in the Central Pacific Ocean. The Polynesian Triangle includes 3 islands that make up sort of the borders of Polynesia. That includes Hawaii, far to the north, Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, to the southeast, and New Zealand to the southwest. And then Polynesia encompasses over 1,000 more small islands, including Samoan islands. Polynesia is huge, way bigger than the US, but most of these islands are tiny, and they're usually very distant from one another. Magellan missed nearly all of them as he traveled through the South Pacific. But finally, after 2 months of sailing, around the 1st of February, Magellan caught the equatorial winds that he should have caught far earlier and entered what's called the Micronesian island, to the northwest of Polynesia. Now, Micronesia is a geographic distinction in the Western Pacific, but within the geographical region of Micronesia is the nation of Micronesia, the Federated States of Micronesia. But that nation only makes up a fraction of the Micronesian islands. Another prominent island chain within Micronesia is called the Marianas Islands. It's close to where the Marianas Trench is located. Now, those are a separate independent nation within Micronesia, except for the largest and southernmost island in the Marianas Islands, the island of Guam. Now, today, Guam is a U.S. territory, and that brings up the question of colonialism. Names and how they relate to geography are a tricky question here. Many Micronesian islands currently belong to other larger nations, or have in the past at the very least, which makes the naming conventions here problematic on its own. For example, the Marianas Islands are named after Mariana of Austria, the Spanish queen who never set foot on the islands. The Philippines are named after Philip II of Spain. The original names of both the Marianas Islands and the Philippines have been lost in the mist of 300 years of colonial rule. And once again, the geography is confusing here because what we think of as the Philippines, the modern nation of the Philippines, isn't the same as what the Spanish considered the Philippines. The modern nation of the Philippines is within the formerly Spanish territory, once called the Philippines. The Marianas were part of that distinction as well, including Guam. In fact, nearly all of what's called Micronesia today is what was once considered by the Spanish crown the Philippines. So in much the same way that I'll sometimes call the Pacific Ocean the Southern Ocean, because the people who lived during the time our story takes place would have considered it the Southern Ocean, I might occasionally call some of these islands part of the Philippines when they're not part of the modern nation-state of the Philippines. And that includes Guam. It was Guam that the lookouts on Magellan's voyage spotted when they called out Tierra, Tierra. The people of Guam, the Comoro, were not called the Comoro when Magellan arrived. That's another problem of the naming conventions. The Comoro is a Spanish designation that still holds today. It's how the local people identify themselves, but it wasn't when Ferdinand Magellan arrived. See, there's this huge variety of cultural diversity in the people of the Pacific Islands. The unifying factors among most of these people is, well, first of all, you've got the shared history of Spanish colonization, but then you've got their linguistic heritage. I mean, there are a ton of different languages spoken in the Pacific Ocean, but they nearly all belong to what's called the Austronesian language family. The Austronesian language family, much like ancient Chinese or ancient Latin, is the progenitor of a ton of modern languages. And before European contact, people who spoke languages belonging to that family stretched all the way from Madagascar in the far, far west to Rapa Nui in the far east to Easter Island. It's more than half of the globe and encompasses both the South Pacific and the Indian Ocean. And those people traversed those oceans in lateen-rigged ships centuries before Magellan was even born. So when people, especially here in the US, when we talk about Pacific Islanders, it's hard to know exactly who they're talking about. Usually that's in reference to Polynesian people who aren't either Hawaiian or Samoan. But it can sometimes include the people of Hawaii, Samoa, the Philippines, Indonesia, and any of 100 other cultural groups, including the Komodo people, the Marianas Islands. And those ships that these people used to traverse the Pacific and Indian Oceans, they were impressive. Magellan's crewmen were certainly impressed with them, and the Komodo came out to meet with them. Fine, fine ships. But everything else about the Komodo people was... Well, imagine this situation. Magellan's men were weak and sick with hunger and scurvy. They needed food and fresh water and vital nutrients. They needed them desperately. And then a small fleet of these impressive lateen-rigged Komoro sailors came out. They thought maybe they're bringing us the food we need. Maybe they're willing to trade. But according to one officer on board the voyage, the Komodo, quote, entered the ships and stole whatever they could lay their hands on, end including the small boat that was fastened to the poop of the flagship. Those people are poor, but ingenious and very thievish, on account of which we called those 3 islands Islas de los Ladrones. In English, the Island of Thieves. But were they really thieves? I mean, they did take whatever they wanted without paying for it. But the Comoro people had different notions of property and ownership from the people of Portugal and Spain. This is the kind of conflict we see a lot when indigenous people come into contact with the outside world. Of course, traditional European propriety flew right out the window when half-naked Brazilian women were offering themselves up freely. But when it comes to your stuff, these Europeans were a lot less inclined toward multiculturalism. There was a brief scuffle, but in the end the Comoro fled in the ship's boat. Magellan led a counterattack the following day and reclaimed their property, including the boat. He burned down the village, killing at least 7 villagers. They moved on west to reach the Philippines, the island group that we would today consider the Philippines, the modern nation of the Philippines, on the 8th of March. They landed at a small, uninhabited island that had water, game, and trees of fresh, ripe fruit. And it might be, in part, that the people who were writing down the events of this voyage knew that those accounts would be read. But the way they wrote about the fruit they found here on this island is even more luscious and loving than how they wrote about the women in Brazil. But it also might be, try an experiment for me. I want you to eat nothing but crackers and stale water for 3 months. Not the good kind of crackers, no olive oil and black pepper. Think month-old off-brand saltines, and then take away the salt. Then go to the grocery store after 2 months of nothing but crackers and buy yourself a single lime. See how fast you eat that lime. See how much you love it. See how sweet it tastes. And don't actually do that. You'll probably die. A bunch of the crewmen on Magellan's voyage did before they reached the Philippines. And the way they died, well, scurvy was just terrible. But the men who found themselves here to this small, uninhabited island had their pick of all the fresh, delicious, vitamin C-rich fruit they could want. All of those old enmities that had blossomed during the mutiny seemed to have fallen by the wayside. These men were survivors together. And here they had a few moments of peace and plenty. But I'd like to look at what they found here in the Philippines from the point of view of another sailor who made the trip and who was similarly unprepared. William Dampier and Charles Swan arrived at Guam 167 years later, in 1686, on board the Signet. Now, Guam was no longer the island of thieves when they arrived. Almost exactly a century before Dampier, the Spanish had showed up to subdue the populace. This wasn't exactly colonization. They weren't setting up colonies, just building forts and harbors. They needed Guam as a sort of a stopover for the Manila galleons. But 18 years before Signet arrived, the Spanish did commence colonization proper. There were a bunch of Spaniards living there. However, these Englishmen were pirates. They'd perfected avoiding the Spanish over many years of a successful career, and they did the same here at Guam. Now, the Englishmen on board the Signet knew all about scurvy. They knew about the causes of it and how to prevent it, vitamin C deficiency and vitamin C. Actually, it had been Francis Drake's second circumnavigation of the globe that led to much of that knowledge. So the men on board Signet weren't suffering from scurvy. They'd consumed plenty of vitamin C before leaving Central America, and they had enough to make it across the Pacific Ocean, which they did much faster than Magellan. They used that equatorial highway. But they were starving. Remember, the crew of the Signet was plotting to kill and eat Captain Charles Swan shortly before arriving. And partly that was the hunger. They were down to just a few spoonfuls of corn a day. And partly it was madness, but mostly it was vengeance. The crewmen wanted to take revenge on Captain Swan and on Dampier, as they saw those two responsible for bringing them on this mad voyage. But Swan and Dampier were safe when they arrived on board. They beheld the bounty that the island had to offer, very similar to that which the men of Ferdinand Magellan's voyage enjoyed. Dampier goes on to tell us at length of the many delicious fruits and vegetables that were available. He talks about coconuts and coconut milk, and then he talks about the broth that the locals made by simmering coconut flesh in a mix of coconut juice, fresh water, and some local spices. They would then add rice and fish and fresh vegetables, and sometimes they would garnish it with a lime or a mango. Honestly, this is starting to make my mouth water. I mean, that sounds delicious, right? Dampier thought so as well. But mostly he's interested in the palm tree and the coconut. He tells the reader of the textile benefits of the palm tree in addition to the nutritional benefits, and he goes into detail about the means of growing them. Then he writes, quote, I have been the longer on this subject to give the reader a particular account of the use and profit of a vegetable which is possibly, of all others, the most generally serviceable to the conveniences as well as necessities of human life. Yet this tree that is of such great use and esteemed so much in the East Indies is scarce regarded in the West Indies, for want of knowledge of the benefit which it may produce. And it is partly for the sake of my countrymen in our American plantations that I have spoken so largely of it. Now that's sort of true, but I mean, it's not like the people, the native people of the West Indies hadn't figured out that the coconut and the palm tree were great. It was the Spanish conquerors that came in, killed all of the Native Americans, and took their land that didn't realize how useful the coconut was, which is crazy because the Spanish knew that coconuts were useful from their time in North Africa. But it's got something to do with that insane colonial attitude, that superiority that they choose to show partly by refusing to eat local foods. But Dampier was more than happy to eat some of those local foods. But then Dampier goes on to tell us about the people of Guam. He was echoing Antonio Pigafetta, a Venetian who was sailing alongside Ferdinand Magellan, and he talked about those ships that the Comoros sailed. He was deeply impressed by them and their seafaring ability. Everyone was always really impressed with these ships, called the proa. Pigafetta compared the proa to the Italian gondola, which makes sense. Both were long, thin ships that had an identical bow and stern. They were built much like a canoe in that neither end was flat. That means that the ship could sail in either direction. Which side was the bow and which was the stern would just switch. Later circumnavigations and men on voyages of discovery would also mention how maneuverable and fast these ships were. The big difference between the proa and, say, a gondola or a canoe is a second hull, parallel to the body of the ship, called the outrigger. When people talk about outrigger canoes, they're talking about a design based on a proa. Dampier writes, quote, the natives are very ingenious beyond any people in making boats, or proas as they are called in the East Indies, and therein they take great delight. Ingenious beyond any people, Dampier says, and he wasn't wrong here. These were the ships that sailed all the way to Madagascar, all the way to Easter Island, that traversed and explored the Philippines and Indonesia, and honestly, they still are that. They're still commonly used in the Pacific Islands today. They're fast, agile, and versatile ships. In fact, the vessel that currently holds the world record for circumnavigation via sailing power, 40 days, is based on the outrigger model. They're amazing ships. The big problem with the ship designs in the classical world, all the way from the Middle East to the Viking world, is that they had trouble tacking against the wind. Turning around was difficult for them. That means that they always had a hard time maneuvering, especially in battle when they needed to move really fast. But these ships could just turn their sail and all of a sudden they would be moving with the wind in an opposite direction. They were spectacularly maneuverable ships. They had one major flaw. They couldn't hold big guns. The Chinese ships that would sometimes sail in from the north, they could hold the big guns. The Japanese ships that would sometimes sail in from the north could hold plenty of big guns. And these ships that arrived with Francis Drake, William Dampier, and Ferdinand Magellan, they all held big guns. And that lack of gunnery would prove to be a problem when armadas of Spanish galleons showed up to conquer the Philippines. But we're not there quite yet. Next time, we're going to finish talking about Ferdinand Magellan, and then we're going to continue on with William Dampier. We're going to look at the major similarity between their voyages and explore the most famous of the three classic blunders. I'd like to thank everyone for listening. I'd like to thank everyone for helping to support the show. Everybody who has recommended this show online or in real life, everybody who has signed up to become a patron on Patreon, or those of you who have made donations through the website, and those of you who have given us a rating or a review wherever it is you listen to the show, you all make this show possible. Thank you. Our theme music was, as always, The Old Captain by the fantastic band Everett. I recently went to go check out the YouTube video of The Old Captain by Everett, and I saw a bunch of comments that were from you people saying that you were sent there by the Pirate History Podcast, so you all are awesome. However, if you haven't checked them out yet, I certainly suggest you do so. You can find them at brillig.com.au. That's BRILLIG.com.au. After you're done with there, why not check out our website at piratehistorypodcast.com, or you can get in touch on Twitter, SoundCloud, Reddit, or YouTube. As always, and most important, thank you for listening.
From a voice that you take down the dream, at the face of an angel, all battered by blood tragedy. Raise your glass in the air with a tear in your eye. Time is gone now to bid him goodbye. For it burst like a storm, the old captain has died. I will live on the legend tonight.
You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
2025 is now upon us. I hope everyone had a great New Year's, but now it's time to start thinking about our New Year's resolutions. Every year I make a lot of big promises to myself, and rarely do I end up keeping all of them. Several years back, though, I made a resolution to save more money, and that's been working out great ever since, which is thanks to today's sponsor, Acorns. Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing so your money has a chance to grow for you, your kids, and your retirement. You don't need to be an expert. Acorns will recommend a diversified portfolio that fits you and your money goals. You don't need to be rich. Acorns lets you invest with the spare money you've got right now. You can start with $5 or even just your spare change. When I started using Acorns years ago now, that's exactly what I did. I set up an account, invested $5, and that took all of about 5 minutes. So if you've got a New Year's resolution to save money and give that money a chance to grow, head to acorns.com/pirate or download the Acorns app and start saving and investing for your future today. Paid non-client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors, LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/pirate. Today's episode is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon, including our Commodore class. That's Commodores Kane, Kenway, Hefe, Jennings, Two Gun Tony, Drunken Dad, Antonio, the Pirate Nopales, Matthew the Navigator, Bull, Vertigon, Hanukkah Linden, Rumgut, and Bootstrap Skate. Hello. Welcome to the Pirate History Podcast. My name is Matt. Thank you for listening. Have you ever watched any of those videos in which Irish people try weird food from around the world? I did recently, and something stuck out to me. Many of the people on that show aren't really used to Mexican food. I mean, they know what it is, they've had Mexican food, but it's still just a little exotic. Sort of how, for some Americans, a good Indian curry might be a little bit exciting. But on the other hand, going out for tamales isn't exactly exotic to most of us. Delicious, yeah, but not exotic. On the inverse, for people in the British Isles, grabbing a curry is an absolutely everyday affair. I suppose it's all about empire. The British occupied Ireland and India, so Ireland has curry. A large part of the US was once the region of New Spain called Mexico, so we have tamales. And in researching today's show, I noticed something else, specifically about names. Due almost entirely to Spanish imperialism, I have an easier time with Filipino names than I do with some of the names on that YouTube channel. I don't speak a word of Filipino or a word of Gaelic, but while I can't pronounce half of those Irish names, I'm relatively comfortable with a number of Filipino names. The official language of the Philippines, Filipino, is distinct from most of its neighboring languages thanks to Spanish influence. They write in Latin script as opposed to their ancient script thanks to Spanish influence. Many indigenous names of peoples and places have been lost thanks to Spanish influence. Today we're looking at the dawn of that influence through the lens of Ferdinand Magellan. This is episode 121, The Winds of Fate. Magellan's departure from Guam was a chaotic affair. In their raid to reclaim their stolen property from the Comoro, they killed a number of men. Antonio Pigafetta, the chronicler of the voyage of Magellan, writes, quote, "We saw some of the women who cried out and tore their hair. I believe it was for the love of those we had killed." End quote. Over 100 Comoro prows chased after the departing ships, and they sped by at amazing speeds. They moved in and around the hulls of Ferdinand Magellan's vessels and threw rocks at their crew, and they hit a number of the crew, and they moved too fast for Magellan to get any shots off at them. Eventually, though, Magellan was too far out to sea, and the Comoro proas turned back. Magellan plunged back into the unknown reaches of the ocean. A few days later, lookouts spotted several islands in quick succession and stopped at the smallest island in view. Considering their experience with the Comoro, Magellan wanted an uninhabited island. The men were weak with hunger and scurvy. Magellan sent the strongest among them ashore to gather what food they could. Lawrence Bergreen writes in Over the Edge of the World, quote, "It was the 5th Sunday in Lent, with Easter fast approaching. Appropriately, Lent is dedicated to Lazarus, risen from the dead. And like him, the surviving crew members had overcome their illness to regain their strength and persevere." End quote. Magellan actually named these islands after Lazarus, but that name didn't stick. And Magellan didn't stick around either. They made for another island that had a much more suitable anchorage where they could make landfall and finally, blessedly, rest. They erected tents on shore and collected fruit and slept for days. Now, Magellan didn't really know where he was. He suspected he might be in the Spice Islands. He wasn't, but he wasn't far off. After about a week, though, they were approached by a small fleet of proas. Now, these proa were clearly of a different design than those from Guam, but Magellan was wary. He armed the men, and they drew up battle lines. A group of local men made landfall and kept their distance. But Magellan, well, first of all, Magellan had a companion with him, known to history as Enrique of Malacca. Enrique had been Magellan's slave since his first voyage to the East Indies under the Portuguese India Armada. Magellan purchased Enrique after he aided in the conquest of Malacca. Enrique spoke Malaysian, but he also spoke the languages of the Spice Islands. The new arrivals spoke a number of different tongues as well, but regardless of what languages they all tried, they didn't find any common language between them. Magellan's hopes were dashed. They weren't in the Spice Islands after all. Still, though, everyone was friendly enough. These men turned out to be fishermen who brought their catch ashore, and, along with a few jugs of coconut wine, they held a little cookout. The following day, Magellan, well, he took these new arrivals out to his ship and decided to be a bit daring. Last time he tried something like this, the locals stole everything that they could lay their hands on, the Comoro people. But these fishermen were less impetuous. Magellan showed them his bags of nutmeg and pepper and mace. The visitors grew excited and took Magellan on deck, and they pointed to the south. And we know today, of course, that that's right toward Spice Islands. A few days later, the fishermen left, and Magellan prepared to set sail. But the question remained, where was he going to go? Magellan was still unsure where he was, but he was starting to suspect. Now, no Europeans had ever been to these islands before, but they were a known factor. They had heard of them from Chinese and Arabian traders. And right now might be the best place to talk about a little bit of geography. If you sail west from Guam, you'll find the Philippines. That's where Magellan was at this point. South of the Philippines, you'll find Malacca, or we might know them as the Moluccas or the Spice Islands. That's where Magellan was aiming. These two groups of islands, the Moluccas and the Philippines, as well as the Marianas Islands, comprise what the conquistadors considered the Philippines, what we would call the Spanish East Indies. However, today, the Moluccas are part of Indonesia. The Indonesian islands that will eventually become key to our story include Borneo to the west of the Moluccas, Java to the southwest, and Sumatra further west than Borneo. Now, those are eventually going to be under Portuguese control. To the northwest, we see mainland Southeast Asia, Myanmar, Malaysia, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand. They would have called it Siam back then, but that's a whole other bag of colonialist cats that we don't need to talk about. Nor do we need to talk about what's in the southeast. We'll get to that later. Many of the crew expected Magellan to sail south for the Spice Islands, but instead, Magellan set a westward route, after the way that the fishermen had gone. After 2 days of sailing, they saw an island that appeared to be glowing. There were campfires. Magellan, though, chose to stay at sea. He didn't know who that fire actually belonged to. Come morning, a canoe rowed out to meet Magellan. They hailed him. To the surprise of everyone on board, Enrique of Malacca responded. He could talk to these sailors, which suggests that Enrique had been here before, or at least somewhere nearby. And that means that Enrique of Malacca was probably the first human being ever to circumnavigate the earth. But about 2 hours later, after the men in the canoe rowed back to shore, 2 larger ships set sail out to meet Magellan. On the larger of these 2 sat an imperious-looking man under a canopy of large leaves. Now this imperious-looking man brought gifts to Magellan, gifts which Magellan wisely and politely declined. He turned out to be a Hindu leader named Raja Colombo. Colombo was under the authority of the Maharaja back in India. At this time in our story, there were 4 major powers in this region, what we would call the Philippines. China had substantial trade interests in the region, in the Philippines and the Spice Islands. Their primary trading partners were the Hindu Rajanates, including this of Raja Colombo. Now, sometimes the Rajanates were allies, and sometimes they were rivals, but at this point in the story, they were close allies against the newest players in the region, the Arabian Islamic Sultanates. And then there were the Datu. They were the traditional indigenous leaders of the Philippines. Now, all of these powers, the Sultanates, the Rajanates, the Chinese, and the Datu, were all in this dance of warfare and diplomacy and economic superiority. They'd been at it for centuries now, and whoever sat on top at any given time controlled the spice trade. And then there were the Portuguese. Now, the Portuguese weren't in the Philippines yet, but they were busy circling the Spice Islands like hungry sharks. The primary Portuguese colony in the Southeast Asian region was Malacca. That's in modern-day Malaysia. Ferdinand Magellan and Francisco Serrao were involved in that conquest. That's when Ferdinand Magellan bought Enrique. The Portuguese also had outposts in Java, Borneo, Siam, and even in China. They'd been busy. But then Magellan arrived in the Philippines at the head of a Spanish fleet, heralding the Spanish arrival. According to Antonio Pigafetta, and really most of this is according to Pigafetta, Magellan and Raja Colombo met on Good Friday 1521. I'm going to play it safe here and decline to say where it is they met. The location is disputed, and it's a point of pride for many Filipinos. The most likely possibility is a small island that was used as a trading post between the Rajanates and the Chinese. On Good Friday, they held a great feast under Raja Colombo. The Raja, Antonio Pigafetta, Magellan, and Enrique all shared a ceremonial cup of wine, which bound them together as friends. The following day, Holy Saturday, or Hallelujah Saturday, according to the Portuguese, Magellan and Raja Colombo held a different kind of ceremony. They rolled up their right sleeves, cut a slash into their forearm, and held those cuts together. They blended their heart's blood, binding them as brothers. And then the next day, on Easter, 1521, the voyage's resident priest held the first Mass ever in the Philippines. In that ceremony, Raja Colombo was baptized. The symbolism here is impossible to ignore. This was the Spanish Empire reborn after the Reconquista. Or maybe it's the rebirth of the Filipino people in the light of Christ. There are a ton of potential interpretations, and usually that would make me suspicious of the date. They appear to be accurate. And there is something more here. Easter is a celebration of literal rebirth, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. But in the time before Christ, people still celebrated rebirth at almost the exact same time, right around the spring equinox. That was a celebration of the rebirth of the sun, a celebration of spring and the rebirth of life to the world. It was a fertility festival, and similar festivals are still held around the world. The deities worshipped in these fertility festivals were almost always feminine and almost always voluptuous. There's a reason that people hunt chocolate eggs brought by a bunny at Easter. Neither eggs nor bunnies have anything to do with the rebirth of Jesus Christ, but both are ancient symbols of sex and fertility. And chocolate's pretty sexy as well. Of old, those voluptuous feminine deities were worshipped on the equinox with uninhibited sex. I bring this all up because of the tenor of the feast held on Easter Sunday, 1521, in the Philippines. Magellan placed a moratorium on sex with any non-Christians by anyone in his voyage. Pigafetta tells us that the men complied with that order, but it became a strained thing. The men were chomping at the bit here. They hadn't seen women for months, and now all of these lovely islander women were clearly interested in the newcomers. So Magellan spoke to the Raja Colombo, who agreed that all of the women would convert to Catholicism along with him. The celebrations that ensued were distinctly pagan. Magellan, though, didn't take part in any of that. Instead, Raja Colombo confessed his troubles to Magellan, troubles that included 2 other political groups in the region. The first of these was the Raja Humabon, who was the real Hindu power in the Philippines. He was the Raja and Datu of the island of Cebu. The Rajanate of Cebu was, dated back to the 13th century, so almost 200 years. They were powerful as well, and favored in the eyes of the Maharaja. Now, technically, Raja Humabon and Raja Colombo were equals, but Practically speaking, Kalambu was a vassal of Raja Kumaban, and the Datu of Cebu had given Kalambu a job, and that job involved the second faction that was giving Kalambu trouble, that was giving Magellan's new brother in blood and Christ trouble. The second faction were the Islamic Arabian powers in the Philippines. They held territory to the north, which was disrupting trade between the Rajanates and the Chinese. Magellan made a decision here, a decision that his crew didn't understand and didn't particularly care for. It's a decision that historians have debated for centuries now. After their Easter celebrations, the men all wanted to sail south to find the Spice Islands. Maybe they could establish diplomatic ties. Maybe they could build a factory and an embassy. What they would do, without question, was to fill their holds with spices. That was going to make them rich. That's why they were here. But instead of that practical decision, Ferdinand Magellan chose to honor his new brother and sail west for Cebu and the Raja Kumaban. His plan appears to have been to introduce himself to Raja Kumaban, to pay his respects, maybe gather some troops and supplies, and sail out to make war on the nearby Islamic power. His reasoning in doing so is most often given as religious zeal. He would be aiding what he saw as crypto-Christians. Remember, Hinduism wasn't really understood. He would be aiding them in a war against Islam. After all, this was a Spanish voyage, and that's basically their mission statement. There's a lot of merit to that analysis, and certainly some truth. But I do want to share Lawrence Bergreen's thoughts on the issue. He writes, quote, "They were beginning to savor the available linen, exotic food, and tantalizing hints of the Spice Islands. Yet a shadow hung over Magellan. Even if the rest of the expedition went flawlessly, there would be hell to pay when he returned to Spain from marooning Cartagena and the priest. He could never return home with honor, and so he pressed on, a fugitive from society and a captive to the winds of fate." End quote. The ramifications of that analysis are interesting. It makes me think that perhaps Magellan thought to set himself up as a ruler, victor over the Muslims who would be king and benevolently welcome the Portuguese to his domain once his cousin Francisco Serrao arrived. That's an interesting bit of alternative history. And what if Magellan had succeeded? He might have been able to set the Philippines up to defend themselves against the incoming forces of Spain and Portugal. And perhaps Spain and Portugal would have been happy to have a regional ruler there who was friendly with them. Magellan, when he arrived on Cebu, was welcomed by Raja Kumaban. He made his intentions clear. His plan was to oust the caliphs from the Philippines for good. It's music to Kumaban's ears.
Not all agents use Zillow solutions. After all, this industry is confusing and it's hard to know who to trust. But the truth is, we're an ally for agents. We want them to succeed. That's why we help agents get ahead with complimentary resources and stay ahead with premium solutions. Zillow works for agents because home doesn't happen without them. Visit Zillow.com/worksforagents to learn more.
Did you know using your browser in incognito mode doesn't actually protect your privacy? Take back your privacy with IPVanish VPN. Just one tap and all your data, passwords, communications, browsing history, and more will be instantly protected. IPVanish makes you virtually invisible online. Use IPVanish on all your devices, anytime you go online at home and especially on public Wi-Fi. Get IPVanish now for 70% off a yearly plan with this exclusive offer at ipvanish.com/audio.
Kumaban agreed to be baptized and was christened Don Carlos, Captain General of Spain. This made him, as far as Spanish military rank was concerned, an equal to Ferdinand Magellan. Kumaban was happy for the new allies, and he gave Magellan all of the gifts that seemed to be traditional. After he was baptized, the women in his harem were baptized as well and made available to the men under Magellan's command. They were given food and feasts and celebrated throughout his domain. But the Rajah was skeptical. So Magellan prepared a grand display of European military prowess. He fired off his guns, he marched his men in parade, and they held an impromptu fencing competition. Humabon was duly impressed, but Magellan went ahead and did him one better. The people of the Philippines, of Cebu at least, had a much more decentralized form of government. They had their own regional chieftains, but very little centralized power. There was the Rajah, but the regional chiefs didn't exactly respect that authority. It reminds me of England in the wake of the Norman conquest. You have all of these regional warlords who were having trouble adjusting to the new feudal structure. Magellan encouraged some of those leaders to follow a more Spanish, feudal form of government. He converted them and convinced them to properly swear fealty to King Don Carlos. So why was Magellan doing all this? Well, he learned that Rajah Humabon didn't have a son. His nephew was the heir presumptive, but that wasn't a certainty. Magellan consolidated Humabon's power through himself. It would put him in a perfect position to serve as a sort of viceroy, and then, once the Rajah died, to take command as king of the Philippines. However, one of the regional leaders resisted Ferdinand Magellan. When King Don Carlos sent word that he required a tribute, this leader didn't send the food that was to aid Magellan in the upcoming war. His name was Chief Lapu-Lapu of Mactan Island. Lapu-Lapu had always been troublesome. The Mactan people were indigenous people who had always resisted Rajah's control. Their island was just off the coast of Cebu. Lapu-Lapu, the Rajah explained, was always a thorn in his side. He was powerless to handle them. I mean, it's not like the people of Mactan Island were powerful or anything, but Humabon's people were indigenous as well. They were related to the people of Mactan. They didn't want to fight them. It's embarrassing, really.